Here also the eulogy delivered by Madam Kuan's eldest son, Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong.
Mama has always been part of our lives. Papa was busy with political work, so she did most of the bringing up of the children, me, Ling, and Yang. She nurtured us, taught us, disciplined us, took care of us, and fussed over us. She would be home for lunch every day when we came home from school, spending some time with us before going back to work in the afternoon. Not surprisingly, Mama didn't shower us with expensive toys and rather disapproved when the grandparents sometimes did. But she'd visit the textile shops that used to be in High Street and bring us home the long, stiff cardboard rolls, the tubes which were at the center of the rolls of fabric, right, and which had been discarded after all the fabric had been sold. They cost nothing, but they were great fun. You can use them as telescopes for sword fights, endless children's games. And when I had my own children, my wife and I did the same. We would visit our maternal grandparents at Pasir Panjang regularly. The house was along the seafront at that time, and at high tide, the water would come right in to the seawall. We would swim in the sea, and Mama would sit on the steps watching over us. Once, when I had almost learned to swim, but not quite, I got into difficulty fooling around with a pair of goggles and a snorkel and nearly drowned. Mama had to plunge in, fully dressed, to rescue me. She wasn't amused. When the boys went away to university, she fussed over us long distance. She was a skillful knitter and knitted us sweaters to stay warm, one after the other. I still have one of them, a favorite old rust-colored one, patched many times at the elbows, but still warm. When Hsien Yang and I got married, Mama embraced her daughters-in-law as her own children. When grandchildren arrived, she helped look after them, especially my two elder ones, XiuQi and Yipeng, after their mother, Ming Yang, died. She and the pawpaw supervised the maids, took the very little ones for walks every evening, and more than made up for what I could not do as a single father. The years passed. Even in old age, Mama kept a motherly eye on her children. She would follow my public appearances on TV and in the press and comment on my dress or demeanor or makeup by the makeup artist. After one particularly long evening function, which both my parents and I attended, she reproached me. She said, "You were bored stiff and looked it." I didn't deny it. When I fell ill with lymphoma, she worried about my children again, and also about me, fretting over whether I was eating enough nutritious food or bird's nest to stay strong and fight the cancer. On Sundays, the family would gather for lunch at Oxley Road. For a time, it was with all the grandchildren, who would make a fine hullabaloo. But as the kids grew up and went off to national service or went away to study, often it would just be back to Papa, Mama, and the three children and our wives, plus Xiaowu, the youngest grandchild. One Sunday in May 2 years ago, we had the usual family lunch. I'd spent the morning on a constituency visit in Dampinis and had told her they were debating whether to allow bicycles on pedestrian footpaths. Hot debate. She reminded me that when I was in Cambridge and was mostly a pedestrian, I had written home to complain about the bicycles being a menace because they crept up quietly on one from behind, giving no warning except for sinister whirring noises. I had completely forgotten, but she was right. She said, the older I get, the longer ago the things I remember. But she tracked current events too and she knew what the hot topics of the day were. I think at that time, the hot topic was pretty girls serving beer in coffee shops. The next day, I was in my office when my security officer told me that Mama had fallen down at home and Weiling was rushing her to NNI. She had had her second stroke. The last 2.5 years have been difficult on her and on the family. Now, she's at peace. Over these last few days, I and my family have been deeply touched by the outpouring of condolences and fond recollections from people of all walks of life. We've stood, receiving the visitors, reminiscing, shaking hands, delighting in seeing each other again, or honored that so many have come. She touched the lives of all those who met her, and many more who knew of her only through TV images, media reports, or perhaps just word of mouth. They sensed what a special person she was and how much she had quietly contributed to Singapore. Thousands turned up at Sri Temasek to pay their respects. Some bowed or stood in silent prayer, while others crossed themselves or did an amast. Still others fingered rosaries, and at least one lady spun a little prayer wheel. Many were visibly moved. Mama's children and our spouses stood beside her to acknowledge her, to acknowledge and thank them all, just as Mama had stood beside us so many times before. All our lives, Mama's been there for us. We've rejoiced together, grieved together, and shared many critical moments and milestones together. Now, we will all have to learn to live without her. But she lives on in her children and grandchildren, in our cherished memories of her, and in the persons she's nurtured us into.
Mrs. Lee's only daughter.